Pittsburgh Steelers fans, how much would Eric Rowe, the veteran safety that the Steelers got off the couch, cost if the Steelers were to bring him back in 2024? And does he deserve a contract? Let's find out all of this and more in this latest episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. Hey everyone, I'm Matty P with another episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. We're talking all things Eric Rowe, the veteran safety. Can the Steelers bring him back next year? Should they bring him back? And what's he done this season to deserve more time in Pittsburgh wearing the black and gold? Now, Eric Rowe is someone that has been well touted after this last performance against the Ravens. Cam Hayward finished that game in the press conference and said he couldn't believe that this guy was sitting on the couch. And that is how Steelers fans feel as well. He's come in a time when the Steelers are without key safeties. Minka Fitzpatrick is injured. Kazee banned up until the playoffs. We've seen that overturned in the last 24 hours that he can play, supposedly. But the Steelers moving out that safety. Keanu Neal's been injured for weeks. They haven't put him on injured reserve. Eric Rowe stepped in, 6'1", veteran safety, 205 pounds, and he's playing really well. So on this show, we're going to do two things. We're going to have a look at what his stats are so far this season. We're going to look at how he compares to the Steelers' current safeties on the roster and forecast how much would it cost for the Steelers to bring him back. Because personally, I think he's earned another year in Pittsburgh, and I think you'll see the Steelers keep him perhaps over Kazee and Neal. But let's get into it. So the fairest thing to do first is to actually compare Eric Rowe, Damontae Kazee, and Keanu Neal and look at what they've done over their careers. Not just in Pittsburgh, what have they done wider in their careers? Now, the first thing to note is that Eric Rowe has had the longest career. He came into the league in 2015, Neal in 2016, Kazee in 2017. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all the same ages. Eric Rowe's the oldest at 31, Kazee's 30, Neal is 28, but Neal was a first-round draft pick, Kazee was a fifth-round draft pick, and Eric Rowe was a second-round draft pick. Eric Rowe's played in 103 games. He's played the most time in the league. Probably not a surprise. They all have the same AV. So for those of you unfamiliar, Pro Football Reference do an approximate valuation based on each season, and it's weighted against the best performers at each position. They're all about the same. Kazee 20, Keanu Neal 25, Eric Rowe 23. So it gives you sort of a benchmark in how their stats overall are. In terms of interceptions, Kazee's the leader. In terms of forced fumbles, Neal's the leader. The other two blokes, Kazee and Eric Rowe, both have 7 each. Forced fumbles, again, Neal's the leader. Neal has played a bit more of that linebacker spot where you're going to force those fumbles. Kazee's more of the deep safety, the free safety type. And Eric Rowe is kind of a hybrid safety between strong and free safety. You know, Steelers offense in a 3-4 defense. Sorry, in a Steelers defense in a 3-4 defense. I like Eric Rowe as that hybrid safety, as someone that can play in the box, potentially someone that can play in the slot. To me, he's not a true strong safety, but he's a really good third or fourth depth safety and really good sub-package safety as well. In terms of tackles, though, obviously Neal has more. He's played linebacker in linebacker roles and box safety in his career, but Eric Rowe has a lot more than Damontae Kazee. So when you're looking at those weights, now it's remiss. We will say this on the season so far in the last 3 games. Eric Rowe has had 29 tackles in just 3 games. 29 tackles, 22 solo tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 2 pass defenses, 1 forced fumble, which he did against the Ravens. Pretty exceptional. He obviously had that key interception as well against Cincy that helped seal the deal, along with Patrick Peterson playing his first game, probably in the safety role for Pittsburgh as well. So Eric Rowe certainly had a big debut for the Steelers. He sat on the Steelers. He came in the Steelers sort of mid-season, mid to late season after the bye, where the Steelers brought him in, where they brought him in on November 20th. He's had an interesting career in terms of him being drafted in by the Eagles, traded to New England, was let go as sort of off contract there, went to Miami. At the end of his deal, they sort of let him go. He sat some time on the Panthers practice squad this season before the Steelers picked him up. He's sort of had this kind of interesting career. He's kind of been held back at times. He's had different injuries. He's sort of just been all topsy-turvy in terms of what he's been able to do in his career to date. But he's having a nice late season bloom with the Steelers, which warrants this question, do you bring him back? And if you did, how much would he cost? But going back to his comparison between Neal, Kazee, and Rowe, the reason why I've done that, obviously, is because they're the veteran safeties on the Steelers. They're all guys that have, apart from Rowe, that have another year contract as well. So we'll look at those sorts of things. But when you look at it in terms of some of the key sort of stats. We talked about some of those headline stats overall. But when you look at the pass coverage, because I mean, obviously we know Neal's going to have more tackles, more forced fumbles, more of those sort of linebacker style stats. But when you look at the pass coverage, Damontae Kazee only in his career allowed an average of 61.5% of all completions on passes that he's been targeted, but he's been targeted only 156 times. That is third on this list if you rank them behind Keanu Neal, behind Eric Rowe. Eric Rowe's been targeted 297 times for 65%. So that is huge. If you look at the fact that Neal has been targeted 178 times, allowing 129 completions or 72.5%. Eric Rowe had the most targeted, has almost allowed the least amount of yards, almost allows the second best out of these three guys in terms of quarterback rating, and allows the lowest yards per target. That is huge from what he's been able to do. So when you look at Eric Rowe, he's the best pass coverage guy out of this group. Now, again, Kazee has played 2 seasons less than him. Kazee also has been targeted deep, so sometimes those yardage goes for more. But there's one thing that I always talk about when I'm reviewing players, and particularly in the DBs, more than anyone, that is often underrated. I rarely hear it spoken about throughout the whole NFL, throughout commentators, throughout mainstream media in the NFL, and that is missed tackle percentage. Now, for safeties, it's traditionally higher. Like if you go into Minka, I think his career average is like over 7.9%. There's a couple of seasons in the last few years where he's had 13% missed tackles. Obviously, that was reduced in the few years he's been playing more of that linebacker where he made all those tackles, had over 100. But in terms of Eric Rowe, 5.5% of his career tackles have been missed. That is very, very low. You go compare that to any of the top safeties around the league, that is a low number. And then remember, he's been targeted like 300 times. He's made a stack of tackles in his career. He's made a combined 410 tackles in his career. He's only missed 5% of those. That is pretty massive, considering he's had an 8-year career as well. Absolutely huge, considering the defenses he's played on as well. So Eric Rowe is definitely, statistically, I think he's definitely got it up there. You could support that. Now, he played at the Patriots too, so he's got 2 championships, so he knows what it takes to fit in a championship defense. He knows what it is to be in a drilled and disciplined defense. Obviously, you've got to be of a decent football IQ as well to play in a Belichick defense, every defender that plays in a Belichick defense, particularly those that are starters, are very flexible in what they can do. So Eric Rowe is definitely someone that brings a lot to the table. And we've seen that the last 3 games in the black and gold in terms of what he's been able to bring. Now, the other thing that I really like about Eric Rowe is that he's sort of, I think that you underestimate what Eric Rowe can do because of that size. I talked about it before. Like Neal is someone that sort of ranges between about 210 to 216 pounds in terms of weight with his size. Kazee is 184 pounds. Some people put him at 175 pounds. He's definitely not more than 190. Then you get Eric Rowe, who's 205. And this is what I mean about that versatile safety. He's probably more of the left or right safety or this hybrid safety. This guy you can use across the different sub packages. He's not your traditional strong safety. He's not your traditional free safety. But if he was your free safety, he'd be a pretty big one. Now, Minka should be holding that role down, not playing strong safety. I believe, and I've said this all season on a number of our shows, so if you've never seen a show from us before, you'll hear me probably say on every second show almost. Somehow I find a way to bring it up. That I was for the Steelers bringing a proper strong safety after they let Terrell Edmonds go. I was for it through the whole offseason. I was for it during training camp, OTA's training camp. I said it during the week in the bye between the preseason and the regular season. I said it through the first 4 weeks because Kazee had some challenges there. I thought Pape had some challenges as well. Neal, has been on and off injured at times. Didn't look good at the start either. And they're playing that 3 safety rotation. There were some real lapses in that. So I said all of that. I said it in the bye week that you had to bring someone in before the trade deadline. I went on about it 3 times during the trade deadline. And the Steelers did none of it. They didn't bring the strong safety in. And I believe it has dearly cost them since the bye. However, the last 3 games, bringing Eric Rowe, we've seen that hybrid nature. That's really worked with Pat P. I think Eric Rowe and Minka together with Pat P moving around the secondary as well, defensive secondary, could be huge for this team. That's just truly what I believe. The other thing that I like about Eric Rowe is that he's someone, if you've got, as I said about the AV before of 23, if you're someone that's getting an AV of 6 at the safety position, you're doing pretty well. The average of a first rounder between 2012 and 2019 at safety was 5.4. Now, this guy, if you go through his first few years in the league, he basically had like 19 through his first 6 seasons. So he's averaging sort of like 3, but there are a couple of years where he was playing injured, where he wasn't the starter. It's hard when you're not starting for you to be able to have that production. But you look at Miami in his time in Miami, there are seasons there where he's got 81 tackles, 91 tackles, 71 tackles combined. He's got like 40, 50 solo. That is huge from him. He's got seasons there with like 11 and 8 pass defenses. He's got 2 and 3 games for the Steelers plus an interception. He has only had 6 interceptions over the course of his career. But as I say, it's hard when you're playing safety. It's hard when you're not necessarily the traditional free safety, a strong safety. You might play left and right. You might be a sub package safety as well. So there's some key things to think about. So that begs the question as well, if we're going to keep Eric Rowe next season, how much would he cost? And that's a really fair question to ask, because obviously the Steelers have a finite amount of cap resources. That is what it is. There's nothing you can do about that. That's it, right? There's a finite amount of resources. Well, Eric Rowe right now has a base salary, because of the way he's been brought in, of literally $300,000. So that's not going to help us historically with what he can earn next year. Now, he's already performed according to the OTC valuation, which is over the cap's valuation based on PFF scores. He's performed $862,000 worth of value. He's only costing the Steelers $300,000 right now. So that's pretty cool. In fact, he's the 178th cheapest safety in the league right now, which is pretty crazy. Think about that in terms of what he is. But remember, he's only played those 3 games. So we've got to put that in a bit of context as well. Now, when you look at the sort of safeties around the league, it's important to let's first look at, as we go into that, let's look at the safeties that the Steelers currently have on the roster. Now, the safeties, obviously, we talked about before, are Kazee and Neal. Kazee is Neal is worth is a $460K cap hit if you don't bring him back next year. A total contract of $2.7 million. I'm not for bringing him back at that price. Maybe a vet minimum, you can't bring him back on like $1 million, 1.1 a year with the vet minimum, but I'm not a fan of bringing him back at $2.7 million. He's not proved that he's capable of performing for the Steelers and being available. And what do we say amongst the Steelers community? The best ability is your availability. That's a Tomlinism. Kazee would have a dead cap hit of $875K. He has a $3 million, so that's the dead cap hit. He'd have a $3 million cap hit next season. I think they're going to bring Kazee back. I think they like what they get in Kazee. And if you have Kazee and Rowe, you draft a young safety, you've got this group of 5 safeties. I love that, because remember, Miles Killebrew is not a safety that really is there to play outside of special teams. I love a 5 safety rotation with the amount the Steelers play sub package, the division they play in with big tight ends, with big wide receivers like your T. Higgins, your David Njoku's, those sorts of guys, Amari Cooper's. I think it's really important. Even your Tyler Boyd's. I think it's really important. And then, of course, you've got your guys over at the Ravens as well. I think it's really important that you've got guys that can lay down the hammer, lay down the hits. So from that perspective, I don't think Eric Rowe is going to cost you much more past $2.2 million. But it also comes down to who else is actually going to be available for the Steelers to go out and acquire. Let's say I want them to go get a young guy. If you look at the top safeties based on current average pay per year, there's a lot of guys on this list that are on void contracts. That's why they're there. So that's why they're free agents, but there's a number of tied to them for next year. Micah Hyde's probably not someone you're going to bring. He's pretty old. You've got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Depending on how deep the Lions go, I think you'll see him re-sign. Jordan Whitehead is more of your Eric Rowe type, but a bit lighter, so it's kind of between Kazee and Eric Rowe. He's more of the free safety, deep safety, or if you're going to play a left and right tandem and you're going to go a lighter guy. Chuck Clark's more of your big, heavy bruiser. So is Jaron Kearse, but why would you bring someone in who's 30 who doesn't know the Steelers defense, particularly after someone who's performed well at the end of the season in Eric Rowe? Darnell Savage, more of the free safety. I like him from the Packers, but Minka's playing that role Darnell Savage is probably going to command an average pay per year packet of $5 million. That's not what we're looking on spending. You go down this list as well. You start to find guys that are either more of the deep free safety guy that can't necessarily step in at the strong safety, or you get some of the classic strong safeties. Right down to you get to like Xavier McKinney, who averaged $2 million. I think the average pay per year currently because he's on a rookie deal. I think he'll get a lot more than that. Kyle Duggar from the Patriots will make more money than what he's making right now as well next year, too. So, quite honestly, and then Terrell Edmonds is obviously at the Titans. I don't think they'll bring him back. And then if you keep going down this list of available free agents, you're probably going to have to spend a lot of money on them. So that's why I really like the idea of what the Steelers may have unearthed in Eric Rowe, because when you think about Eric Rowe, when you think about what he's brought to this team, the veteran leadership, I don't think they're going to cut Kazee. They can save money and not bring back Neal. Rowe at a vet minimum or an incentive-laden deal. So maybe they bring back on the vet minimum plus another 1.5. Maybe it's based on incentives, based on a $500,000 roster bonus, $1 million incentives, or $750,000 incentives. Let's say 3 interceptions, 12 pass defense, that sort of thing. He could be a guy that you want to bring back if he wants to prolong his career. But I like what I've seen out of him. I think he's earned the respect of the locker room. The amount that the narrative is shifted on him since he's been brought in, and in terms of, and not that it was ever not out there for him, and not that it was ever against him, but I think the fact that you've got so many people around the Steelers organization talking about this, there's the tape that's doing the rounds now, or the social media clip doing the rounds right now of Tomlin talking about off the couch as they're walking back off the field into the locker room. I love the vibe of this team. Now, I'm producing this video before the Mike Tomlin press conference. I'm sure Eric Rowe will be mentioned in that press conference. So hopefully this is a timely video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. Do you think they should keep Eric Rowe? Would you be happy with them spending a couple of mil on him? And would you be happy with them having to let go Neal to keep Eric Rowe? Keen to hear what your thoughts are. Make sure if you did like this show, hit that like button. It tells me the content that you're enjoying. If this is one of the multiple videos, or it's your first video with Steelers Touchdown Under, and you like what you had to hear, please hit that sub button. We're on a race to 500 by the end of the Super Bowl. We're pressing hard for that, and we're definitely seeing that tick up. Lots of cool comments coming through from a lot of you out there. Really enjoying that engagement with you. And as always, go Steelers.